Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you recognizing me for the 5 minutes. Questions for the entire panel. I know that Senator Toomey had a question about capitalism versus stakeholder capitalism, and I'd add to that woke capitalism that seems to be running amok throughout the financial institutions of our country. It seems like you all are very comfortable picking winners and losers, specifically those who signed the letter in opposition to Georgia. That would be Bank of America, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs, picking winners and losers in certain areas, especially in election law. I just want to understand your position on that very important law, because I, as a Southerner and African American who's voted in the South all my life, would hate any form of discrimination, anything that restricts voting rights. What part of the Georgia law restricted voting rights or was discriminatory? Any before they signed the letter?
Senator Scott, our company signed that letter based on the input from our ESG committee and our teammates about how they felt when the law came in. In our view, as a company, we believe that there ought to be a concerted effort to get to status standards that we can all agree to, because all of us, and including what you just said, is the access for people who are eligible to vote is paramount to having a great democracy. So it came out of our teammates, like we make a lot of these decisions, expressing grave concern. And so
let me just because I understood what you said, Mr. Miami, and I appreciate your comments, but my question is, what part of the law was discriminatory? What part of the law restricted? If you're actually increasing the number of days of early voting, if you're actually codifying a law, drop boxes that were not a part of the law, if you are actually making it easier to vote but harder to cheat, what part of that law was discriminatory or restricted access? I've been studying the law, and that's one of the reasons why I asked that question, because from my perspective, and frankly, from the words on the paper, 20-pound paper, maybe not worth much, but those words are very powerful. It did not prevent anyone from voting, and frankly, made it easier to vote earlier. And I just am dumbfounded by what the answer to the question was. Yes, we support capitalism, but the stakeholder capitalism or the woke capitalism seems to be running amok. And I say that because I can't find anyone who will answer the question specifically, giving me any examples or specific provisions of the law that we don't support. But at the same time, we will discriminate, it seems, against industries that we don't like. And that's where that stakeholder capitalism comes into play, because banks benefit from a number of explicit and implicit government protections and subsidies, all backed by US taxpayers. So if it is legal and constitutionally protected, the Second Amendment, why would you refuse to bank companies that are in the industry? That I don't fully understand. So it seems like picking winners and losers in companies, and you're diving into choosing which laws you want to uphold and which laws you find offensive, but you can't articulate a position on why those things are offensive. It just seems confusing to me that one would say, I support capitalism, but I'm doing these things that are inconsistent with the statement that I support capitalism, and then I cannot articulate a single reason why I would not support, why I oppose the law in Georgia, or why I oppose funding or financing the oil industry or manufacturers of guns. I just find it to be disheartening as a former member of some of the institutions, as an account holder and a member of others, why it is that you all have taken such a strong, clear position, but can't or won't articulate the reason for that position. Well, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time, and have a good day.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Warner from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to litigate the Georgia law with my my good friend Senator Scott from South Carolina, who we've worked on a lot of projects together, but I would start with the fact that the Georgia law that makes it illegal for someone to voluntarily give somebody a glass of water if you're waiting for hours and hours in line to vote runs counter to any kind of basic notion of fairness in American democracy. And, there are a host of issues that I think why reasonable people, not just from civil rights organizations, but from business organizations across the round have said, in the era of 2021, cutting back on voting rights should not be how our country ought to be moving forward. I want to pick up on some of the questions that Senator Van Hollen's had, and I've talked with most of you guys and know you. I'm not, I don't come in with a immediate bias against you, but I think we got to put up, you guys got to help put up more than you have. The wealth gap in this country should scare the hell out of all of us. How you guys have come through COVID, and and I would argue part of that due to some of the Dodd-Frank reforms. Well capitalized, you've come through well. We lost 440,000 Black businesses last year. We've seen huge swaths of Latino businesses go down. Lots of small businesses in Appalachia as well. One of the areas that we have, and I've talked with most of you about this, is Community Development Financial Institutes, CDFIs. The federal government finally, and I got to give former Secretary Mnuchin some credit for this, and people like Senator Scott, who was a partner on this, we put up $12 billion to both help CDFIs who lend to disenfranchised communities and low and moderate income communities. We put up $12 billion, $3 billion in grants, $9 billion in tier one capital. With almost all my conversations with you guys or your folks underneath, you've always had some kind of regulatory reason why you can't help CDFIs or can't do more. I'm going to need you to lean in on this issue going forward, not just with CDFIs. I see each of what you guys have I read about almost each of your institutions in many of the daily political rags that come out talking about what your institution is doing to help this advantage. What I don't see, though, is how do we get a quarterly update on those? I really think there is a moment in time right now where, whether it's working with CDFIs, whether it's a housing proposal that we've been working on, that I hope to get the chairman on board with as well, that would actually create a 20-year mortgage product for first-generation home buyers that would double the rate of wealth accumulation. And we've tried to price this with an interest rate subsidy that would, you could still make your $900 a month, mortgage payment on a 30-year note, you'd actually be getting it on a 20-year note. Trust me on the math on this. We're going to need you to lean in. We're going to need you to be much more participatory. And again, no disrespect to the great ads that run about what each of your institutions are doing, but we got to really, I think, up our game. And if there are regulatory changes that need to be able to make sure you're able to put, some tier one capital into some of these institutions, if there are other tools, I'd love to work with you. But when we've seen the kind of disruption that's taken place in our economy over the last year, I think you guys can definitely be part of the solution. I appreciate some of the programs you put up, but I am asking you on a generic basis to be willing to engage with me and others who care about trying to do something on a systemic basis, both on the wealth gap in this country and on the access to capital issues. As we showed with PPP, well-intentioned program, but the number of minority or women-owned businesses that got those first rounds because they didn't have prior banking relationships was huge. And I know my time's about up, but I will be back to all of you on an individual basis and want to continue this conversation. Last thing I want to raise, though, I think I've got, trying to look desperately for the clock here. I think I've got one, what has not been raised yet, I think from many of our colleagues, is the questions around cyber. The country finally saw with the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, what a challenge cyber can be. Think about the fact that the Russians were in 18,000 companies with SolarWinds attack. That if the Russians had decided to launch that kind of attack through SolarWinds rather than the one-off ransomware, it would have brought our economy to an end. You guys in the financial sector have done a pretty good job, but we're going to need you again, both weighing in on, I believe, the need for mandatory reporting requirements so that public and private sector can sort through this. Finance sector has got some of that. And we're also going to need to, and I know many of you have started looking at this, look at this, the challenges around cryptocurrencies, because as we all know, that is the ransomware payment methodology of choice. We worked with all of you and Senator Brown did leadership, Senator Crapo, on the issue of the anti-money laundering and beneficial ownership bill we put in place last year, again, with your help, but we're going to need to partner together on this issue around crypto and the issue around cyber. And since I can't see, Sherry, is my time up?
Your time has expired. Your time has expired.
All right, well, I will be back on both those, but thank you so much and look forward to visiting.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Thank you. Senator Shelby's recognized from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.